Welcome to the Achievable FINRA podcast. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have affordable courses for the FINRA SIE, Series 6, Series 7, 63, 65, and 66 exams with industry best pass rates. Each Achievable course includes everything you need to pass the first time. A full textbook, videos on key topics, thousands of questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free at achievable.me. And if you like it, use the code podcast to get you 10% off at checkout. This podcast was made from a video by Achievable's FINRA course author, Brandon Rith. If you'd like to have the visual aid of a video, please go to Achievable's YouTube channel and search for the video by the same name.
Let's talk through income strategies. Specifically, this video will go over a covered put, which is a strategy that involves short shares of stock paired with a short put. To analyze this type of strategy, we'll put a scenario in front of us with multiple questions below. Let's go ahead and put that on the screen. An investor goes short 100 XYZ shares when the stock's market price is 55. A few days after the shares are sold short, the investor goes short one XYZ 50 put at a premium of $4. And then we have a bunch of questions below. First thing to get out of the way, you will not see a question with multiple parts like we have here. We have 7 questions below that we'll go through. We're just doing this so we can cover a lot of ground in one video. But don't worry, you're not going to get a 7-part question on the actual exam. If you want to pause this video and see if you can answer the questions that are below the scenario, go ahead and do that now. And when you hit play, we will look at them together. All right, let's dive right in. The first question is, what strategy is this? I already gave this away at the beginning of the video. This is a type of income strategy. You can generally tell that you're dealing with an income-based strategy when you have a stock position paired with a short option. And that certainly is what we have here. In particular, we have a covered put. Now, first thing to get out of the way, I personally really dislike the name covered put because it's a little misleading. Whenever we hear the word covered, we typically think lack of risk or things are protected, and there certainly is an element of that here. One thing that we'll look at once we start picking apart the different parts of the strategy is that the put's risk is covered in this scenario. It's just that the risk of the stock specifically is not. So something I want you to keep an eye out for as we go through this video is the risk that is involved with this strategy. And trust me, anytime you have a tricky thing, like a name that says covered, but there actually is a lot of risk, those are things that the test writers tend to pick on. The next question is, what's the market sentiment? The best way to approach this anytime you have stock paired with an option, let's first think about things from the stock's perspective, and then we can bring in the option on the tail end of things to put it all together. A short stock position is a bearish strategy that profits when the market price falls. An investor has borrowed shares from their broker dealer, sold those shares in hopes to buy them back so that they can return those shares at a lower price. The lower the market price falls, the better. And in this scenario, if we're just focusing on the short stock, best case scenario would be if the market price falls to 0. At 0, the investor would be able to buy back the stock for nothing and lock in essentially a $55 gain. They sold short stock at 55, they bought back at 0. That is an incredible profit an investor makes. Something like this would occur if you sold short a company's stock and then that company went bankrupt. But one big thing we need to remember is that we also have an option paired here. So let's think about what would happen with the option should the market price fall all the way down to 0. We have a short put here, and the big thing we need to ask ourselves is, first and foremost, will this option be exercised? The easiest way to do that is with put down. Puts get exercised if the market price falls below the strike price of the put. And is that the case here? Is 0 below 50? Yes, it is. So in this scenario, the put is going to be exercised, and a short put obligates the investor to buy back stock at the strike price. Doesn't really matter if the market price goes to 49 or down to 0. Anytime the market price falls below 50, we can expect this short put to get exercised, forcing the investor to buy back the stock at 50 and essentially closing their entire position. So to put that all together, we want the market price to fall, but we know if it falls far enough, Essentially, if it just falls more than $5 per share, we're getting exercised and we're going to be forced to buy back the stock at 50. Now, selling short stock initially at 55 and then buying it back at 50, that'd be a $5 gain. The investor also is able to keep the premium on the option. One other thing we need to broach just real quick is maybe it's worth it to think about what happens if the market price rises. If the market price rises to 100 and the investor wants to close their position, that means they sold short at 55, they bought back at 100. That is a $45 loss on their hands if that's the case. And when the market price is above the strike price of a put, that put is out of the money, has no intrinsic value, and will not be exercised. The further the market price rises, the worse it gets with the short stock position. So we should know right away that the market sentiment is not bullish. We're losing money if the market price rises. The investor here hopes the market price falls. We got to keep in mind that if the market price falls below 50, we're going to be exercised and we're going to be forced to close our position. So if anything, we could call this strategy bear neutral. If the market price stays relatively flat, or if it goes down, the investor is going to be relatively happy. Now, with all that being said, you might be wondering why an investor would engage in this type of strategy. Now, first and foremost, the investors should not be short the stock unless they truly are betting against the company that they're shorting. So this investor probably doesn't like the company, thinks it's going to lose value over time, and is hoping to make a profit on that. But at the same time, if they thought the market price was going to fall drastically relatively soon, they shouldn't have sold the put. Selling the put caps their downside gain potential once the market price gets down below 50. So overall, this is great for an investor that is betting, probably on a long-term scale, that the stock price will fall, but maybe in the short term, at least up until when the option expires, they're expecting the market price to be relatively flat. So they don't want to close the short position, but at the same time, they think the market's not going to go anywhere. I think it's going to stay relatively flat. So this is a way to increase your income in a relatively flat market. When you have a short stock position, you're increasing your income by selling that option and collecting that option premium. The remaining 5 questions below are all math-based questions. And for any math-based question, I recommend that you have some kind of system in place. I am a big fan of the T-chart, so let's go ahead and put that in front of us. We have plus and minus columns and stock and option rows here. The investor sold short stock at 55, so we'll place a 55 on the plus side in the stock row. And they also sold a put for 4, so we'll put a 4 on the plus side in the option row. And that is the start of the T-chart. Let's go ahead and go into our first question here, which is, what is our maximum gain? When we talked about market sentiment, we discussed the best way to look at things. We should already know that if the market price rises substantially, we're in deep trouble. But if the market price falls, that's probably where our profit center is. The best way to approach a hypothetical question like maximum gain is to identify the dominant part of the strategy, which is the stock, and let's think about how we would gain money through that position. We already know the short stock position makes money when the market price falls. Best case scenario is if the market price falls to 0. So let's focus on that point of 0, and then we bring in the short put. The question is, at 0, will the short put be exercised? Put down, puts are exercised if the market price is below the strike price, and that certainly is the case here. That put will be exercised, forcing the investor to buy back the stock at 50. That is their best case scenario, which is buying back the stock at 50 as long as that short put is in place. So to complete the T-chart, we'll put a 50 on the minus side in the stock row, knowing that that is the best case scenario to buy back the stock at, and that finishes our T-chart. We sold short the stock for 55 and sold the option for a premium of 4. That is a 59 on the plus side. We have a 50 on the minus side. Once we net those two numbers, that leaves us with a 9 left over on the plus side. That is our maximum gain. There are 100 shares involved here, so we'll take 9, multiply it times 100. Our maximum gain in this scenario is $900. Now on to maximum loss. We're going to think about this in the same general way as we thought about maximum gain, just from a loss perspective. We're going to focus on the stock first. Short stock positions lose when the market price rises, and we already know we have a maximum loss of unlimited as the market price rises. There is no ceiling to the market. The higher the market price rises, the more the investor loses on that short stock position because that stock becomes more and more expensive to buy back. The only other question we should ask ourselves here is what happens to the put should the market price rise? Put down, puts are only exercised if the market price falls below the strike price. So if the market price goes up to 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000, 1 million, Doesn't really matter. The put will expire worthless, and the higher that market price rises, the more the investor loses on the short stock position. So the answer here, which is really difficult to plug into the T-chart, we really can't do much with the T-chart when the answer is unlimited, but our maximum loss here is unlimited because of the short stock position. This is what I wanted you to keep an eye out for. This is a covered put we have here, but the maximum loss is unlimited. This is something that some of you will encounter on the exam, and it's likely to be set up in a real tricky way. Covered puts are not low risk strategies. They are high risk strategies. Now, real quick, just to focus on the name, when we say covered put, what we're saying is that the risk of the put is covered. If you go short a put, your risk is that the market price falls substantially, and then you'll be forced to buy stock at the higher strike price when it's worth much less in the actual market itself. So basically, short puts lose money when the market price falls, but here we have a short stock position that offsets that risk, and that is why we call it a covered put. Again, the risk of the put is covered, but not the risk of the short stock position. For break even, let's focus on the T-chart and get to the answer in the easiest possible manner, and then we'll talk about the context behind it. The T-chart is your best friend when it comes to a break even question, and if you can utilize it correctly, this is a simple answer. We have a 55 on the plus side in the stock row and a 4 on the plus side in the option row. We will be at break even when we have the same number on both sides of the T-chart. And in particular, what you want to focus on is the empty box in the stock row. The question is what number could possibly go there that would give us the same number on both sides? And there is only one answer, and that is 59. Remember, this exam is a multiple choice exam. You don't have to pull this number out of thin air. They're going to give you 4 numbers, and you can plug in all 4 numbers. There's only one of them that will give you a balanced out T-chart, and in this case, it's 59. Now, for context, the investor, when they establish this position, are up right from the beginning. Yeah, they sold short stock at 55, and let's assume the market price stays around 55, so they won't make or lose any money initially on the stock position, but they sell that put for a premium of 4. That puts them up a total of $400 from the very beginning. And the only way for the investor to get back to break even is if they lose that $400 through the stock position. If the market price rises to 59 and the investor just closes their position, they sold short at 55, bought back at 59, that's a $4 loss per share, and that $4 loss is offset by the $4 premium that they made up front, bringing them back to break even. The last 2 questions are specific scenarios. The first one is, what's the gain or loss if the market price goes to 45? Let's focus on the stock first. We sold short at 55. If the market price falls to 45, we'll be pretty happy about that. That's a $10 gain if the short stock position is the only thing in place, but we have to remember that there's a short put involved here. Using put down to our advantage, puts get exercised if the market price falls below the strike price. Well, we have a $50 strike price, market price is at 45, that put is going to be exercised, forcing the investor to buy back the stock at 50. It really doesn't matter how far the market price falls below 50. We already know the investor will be forced to buy back that stock at 50. So a lot of this is going to feel really similar to maximum gain because we're basically at our maximum gain. We'll plug in a 50 on the minus side in the stock row, and that's the end of the story. We have a 59 on the plus side, a 50 on the minus side. That nets out as a 9 on the plus side, multiplied times 100 shares. If the market price falls to 45, we have a $900 overall gain. Last question. What is the gain or loss if the market price rises to 70? Let's think about the stock first again. At 70, this is not good for our short stock position. We sold short stock at 55. If the market price rises to 70 and we close the position, we're locking in a $15 loss on that stock position. Not good for the investor. The only other thing we need to ask ourselves is, will the short put get exercised? Put down, puts only get exercised if the market price falls below the strike price. Are we below the strike price at 70? No, we're not. So that put will just expire worthless. So assuming the investor wants to close their position at 70, that would be the end of the line. We would plug in a 70 on the minus side in the stock row, and that is the end. We have a 59 on the plus side, a 70 on the minus side. That leaves us with $11 left over on the minus side, multiplied times 100 shares. That gives us an $1,100 loss at a market price of 70.